So, last time I was on the stage, I was talking about sharks, which is one of my other passions. So I think a transition to politics in the White House is a natural one. I'm going to introduce to start David Litt, who's head writer and producer of Funny or Die. He served as a White House speechwriter from 2011 to 2016, and he helped write President Obama's onstage appearance with Keegan-Michael Key's character of Luther the Anger Translator, which has been viewed online more than 42 million times, and apparently by many people in this room. In addition, we have Brad Jenkins. He's managing director and executive producer of Funny or Die DC. He provides consulting services on talent outreach, writing, and branding strategies for a range of clients, in addition to creating content. And he is also a White House refugee, having served as President Obama's liaison and director of engagement to the creative and advocacy communities for the last 4 years. So we're lucky to have both of them here. And as you know, the topic is political humor, and so I thought we'd start, David, by talking a little about how political humor has been used over the years by previous presidents and then culminating with the current one. So if you could give a little bit of an overview.
Sure. I think being funny has always been a plus for a president. I do think there's been a real shift in the way that presidents use humor, and I think this president has been the first to use it in the specific way where Funny or Die kind of comes in. So I think where you used to see presidents use humor, Ronald Reagan very famously said he was not going to make his opponent's youth and inexperience an issue in a debate. That was a way of getting some attention and deflecting an issue. I think you've also seen, I've read a lot of White House Correspondents' Dinner transcripts over the years for my job, or for my former job. You would see Gerald Ford make jokes about, Aldo Beckman and the swizzle stick he would always carry, which is hilarious. But they were very inside jokes. And I think this is the first president to embrace comedy in the way that, where he is doing something that is just legitimately funny, not just as the president, but it stands on its own as a piece of comedy, but then also has an impact on his agenda as president.
Excellent. And to illustrate this, for the few people who might not have seen Luther the Anger Translator, at least in the last, say, 48 hours, we're going to play a clip to give people a sense of how President Obama's tried to use this. Assuming it works.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. If not, David's going to do an unbelievable
Let's really hope that clip lit.
Y'all, if you haven't noticed, California is bone dry. It looked like a trailer for the new Mad Max movie up in there. Y'all think that Bradley Cooper came here because he wants to talk to Chuck Todd? He needed a glass of water. Come on.
The science is clear. The science is clear. 9 out of the 10 hottest years ever came in the last decade.
Now, I'm not a scientist, but I do know how to count to 10.
Rising seas, more violent storms.
You got mosquitoes, sweaty people on the train stinking it up. It's just nasty.
I mean, look at what's happening right now. Every serious scientist says we need to act. The Pentagon says it's a national security risk. Miami floods on a sunny day, and instead of doing anything about it, we've got elected officials throwing snowballs in the Senate.
Okay, Mr. I think I got it, bro.
It is crazy. What about our kids? What kind of stupid, short-sighted, irresponsible bull?
Whoa, hey!
What?
Okay, no, hey.
What?
All due respect, sir, you don't need an anger translator. You need counseling.
So obviously you were trying to hammer across a point on climate change. Why don't you talk a little both about what you were trying to do there, but also how you constructed that and how a bit of that interplay evolved.
Yes. Well, so when we think about something that's that's funny in that way, most of it is just funny. I mean, the three or 4 minutes of that, there's no sort of deep political point. But you kind of get one chance to get something across that you might otherwise not get across in that way. And I think with this, we felt like climate change was an issue we knew the president really cared about. We knew it really did make him angry, the way we're not doing enough about it. And so this was a chance to just showcase that side of him. And the fun thing was when we sort of wrote that pivot into the script so that he was going to get angry and the anger translator was going to have to calm him down. That was something the president totally embraced. I mean, which makes it a lot easier. He was, he got it immediately and was just really happy to do it.
Got it. And how does he deal with comedians? And we'll see, another clip soon. But I'm curious of he's dealing with people who have certain personas. How does he interact with them, and how do you navigate the fact that you have on one hand a sitting president and on the other hand people who are comics for a living?
Well, I think the hard thing often the comics are trying to remember that they have to, they're doing their job and they're being funny and they're with the president, which is a scary thing. I think for him, he knows that he's playing himself. I mean, you pretty much never see him go outside of playing the character of the president, and so he's not being asked to be a professional comedian. And sometimes we would. We've given him jokes in the Oval Office, and he'll say, "This would be funny if a comedian did it," which is a sort of polite way of being like, "This is a terrible idea." And I think he's aware that he's funny as an exaggerated version of himself, but it's the comedian's job to be the comedian.
Got it. And Brad, why don't we give another example of this and talk a little about how, sometimes it's very hard to tell, the impact of one of these skits. Clearly, while the president has pursued, for example, regulations on greenhouse gas emissions, that did not convince Jim Inhofe or anybody else in the Senate to somehow embrace action on climate change. In the case of Between Two Ferns, which was obviously done as a way to promote registering under the Affordable Care Act for coverage, there was much more of a direct correlation between an idea and what ended up happening. And before we see it, could you just talk a little about how you all decided to pursue what was certainly a fairly unorthodox strategy at a time when you had a policy initiative that had been under harsh criticism for its rollout?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the difference there is I think you hit the nail on the head with the audience, because that was largely a room full of political elites and reporters. And with healthcare.gov and the Affordable Care Act enrollment, it was really a consumer-facing campaign. We needed to reach millions of, in many cases, young people, right? In order for the exchanges to work, we knew that we needed a whole bunch of healthy young people to enroll. We knew that sick and elderly and people that really needed healthcare were going to sign up. What was in doubt was whether we can actually get healthy young people to go to a website and sign up for coverage. And so the angle there is, putting aside the challenges with healthcare.gov, which is a separate conversation, I think the challenge was creating content that young people will actually seek out, right? The Correspondents' Dinner, it's this kind of yearly staple. David helped, I think, break C-SPAN's ratings, so they should thank you for that great bit. But generally speaking, young people aren't like waiting for the Correspondents' Dinner speech every year. And they surely aren't waiting for Affordable Care Act content from the White House. So that's not something that they were waiting for. So we needed to be, in many ways, we need to be really brave. And I think that it wasn't a done deal that we're going to use humor. I think that we were thinking about a lot of different tools in trying to reach young people and drive them to a website. But thank God we did use humor, and thank God we did use comedy. And we had a lot of data and analytics that, in many ways, prove the point that, by and large, young people share funny content. Like 7 out of 10, year after year, of the most viral videos are videos that are funny, because people want to laugh, and they get a chuckle, and then they share it. And that's what we needed. We needed an organic, viral campaign that was in many parts shared with people that you trust and know. So if your friend shared this video, you're gonna be a lot more willing to watch the video than if it's on whitehouse.gov.
And how do you set, when you're doing an unconventional proposal like that, how do you sell it? Is this a question at the time you were working for Valerie Jarrett, senior
Yes.
advisor to the president, who also heads the Office of Public Engagement? Was it a question of her getting interested in it and pursuing it? To what extent was it the communications office?
Yeah.
You obviously had HHS going on. How does that evolve, and who tells the president, we want you to be on this show you've never heard of, which is kind of a pretend show as it is?
Yeah.
So forth. And
it's a very good question. I mean, it was all hands on deck. I will say that there was an entire team in our office that, kudos to Marlon Marshall and Paulette Aniskoff and the team that really built this incredible outreach operation. And it wasn't just this video, it was community health center presidents, it was faith leaders, it was business leaders, it was athletes, all different communities trying to get people aware of the fact that they can get coverage. This was something where this idea, in my opinion, would not have happened if it weren't for healthcare.gov not working for 2 months. Mm-hmm. I think that this was a little bit of, an emergency break glass moment. And it started really from, I will say Valerie Jarrett. It really started from the top. I think she continued to say to people way above David and I's pay grade that we needed a breakthrough moment. We needed a water cooler moment, mm-hmm. that young people just weren't going to the website. Mm-hmm. And it also helped that Valerie met with Zach Galifianakis. This was months before the enrollment period started. And I don't think Valerie even knew what Between Two Ferns was. So it was an interesting conversation. But it worked out very well. It also helps to have David Litt, who writes the president's comic speeches, and Cody and other people in the communications team all were big fans of Between Two Ferns. So that also helps. But it really comes down to the data. Funny or Die was able to prove this is the exact demographic that we were trying to reach. It was largely men. It was largely healthy young men, because it was mostly young people. And their distribution network reached tens of millions of people. So we needed to move fast. We needed to reach tens of millions of people, and Funny or Die seemed like the logical place to do it.
Okay, so let's roll that clip so you guys can see a bit of that.
Sorry I had to cancel a few times. My mouse pad broke last week, and I had to get my great aunt some diabetes shoes, and
You know what, Zach? It's no problem. I have to say, when I heard that, people actually watch this show, I was actually pretty surprised.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Between Two Ferns. I'm your host, Zach Galifianakis, and my guest today is President Barack Obama.
Good to be with you, Zach.
First question. In 2013, you pardoned a turkey. What do you have planned for 2014?
We'll probably pardon another turkey. We do that every Thanksgiving. Was that depressing to you, seeing one turkey kind of taken out of circulation, a turkey you couldn't eat?
So how does this work? Do you send Ambassador Rodman to North Korea on your behalf? I had read somewhere that you'd be sending Hulk Hogan to Syria, or is that more of a job for Tanya Harding?
Zach, he's not our ambassador.
What should we do about North IKEA? North.
Why don't we move on?
I have to know, what is it like to be the last black president?
Seriously? What's it like for this to be the last time you ever talked to a president?
It must kind of stink, though, that you can't run, 3 times.
No, actually, I think it's a good idea. If I...
It's okay, you can watch it no. Then it'll make them happy, they'll get even more hits, it'll all work out. So basically you did that, and obviously there was a huge uptick in enrollment on that actual day when it went on, right?
Yeah, and there was a healthcare plug. It just, it's many more minutes.
Exactly, we're not going to sit through all that.
Yeah, it was the highest performing video that Funny or Die did, let alone the White House. And so it's about 40 million views of this video within the first week. And to your point, 40% uptick in traffic to healthcare.gov. So it was a tremendous success. Colbert and Jon Stewart, everyone was talking about how crazy of a success this video was. And we're actually, ironically, people who were opposed to Obamacare were not huge fans of this video because it was succeeding. It was doing exactly what we sought out to do, which was get young people aware about the product.
And obviously, before this happened, Funny or Die did not have a Washington office, and in many ways, right, that venture grew out of this. And I'm curious, again, you've done a range of videos, ones that often align with the administration's agenda. Sometimes they don't. When at this point, both of you, when you're kind of trying to evaluate what makes sense and what are the kind of issues where you can produce content that, frankly, you want a lot of people to see because that's part of your bottom line. What have you found? What kind of connects with people? What's the kind of political humor, particularly in, one of the most unprecedented presidential campaigns we've had, that you feel like really, connects and can go viral?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when we sought out, it was after the success of this, Funny or Die started getting a lot of random requests from organizations and nonprofits and foundations who all had their own cause or their own campaign, and they wanted a Between Two Ferns as well. And so when Funny or Die reached out to me and they asked me to help them navigate this, I think the original intent was, one, really telling stories that young people and people not in Washington are unaware of, really trying to tell the stories that aren't being told in Washington. And two, I think, and this ties well into the cycle, young people generally suck at voting. I don't know if you guys got that memo. I don't know what it is, but especially during midterms, like no young person votes in the midterms. Something like 12% of college students in the last midterms voted, which is just very depressing. So I think that we really did think that we had an opportunity, if we're able to work with some great campaigns, tell some great stories, drive engagement, that maybe we can help make this cycle entertaining. And I will say that this was like over a year ago. We didn't realize what this campaign cycle was actually going to be. We didn't realize a guy named Donald Trump was going to run for office. And so I think we were afraid that no young person was going to pay attention to this. And I think that that's probably the opposite. But, as far as the comedy side, David could speak to what we try to find in terms of comedic beats with political work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one formula to it. I think that we get so much, everyone gets to watch so much stuff now. And this was something we found at the White House too, right? Anything that works, within a few weeks, you've now seen dozens of examples of that thing. So what people gravitate toward, and there's no recipe for a viral video, but people want to see something they haven't seen before. And that's one of the reasons why I think Ferns was so successful. It's one of the reasons the successful things that we've done have worked. You find a way to take a concept or a cause that people may have heard of before, but some interesting combination or some new concept or just something original. And I think that is the bedrock of all these successful things. You have to do something new.
So we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to start asking our crowdsourced questions. One is, and I think this would be for David, are there any topics that are off limits in political humor, and should there be? And as a subset to that, are there ones that, for example, again, also with your interaction with the president, he's indicated that they should be off limits?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, if you're not a full-time comedy brand, if you're the White House, or if you're any sort of nonprofit or cause, is just you have to game things out into the future. So what that meant at the White House more than anything was you will not see the president make a joke about national security because you don't know what's going to happen the next week. You don't want to have a joke where something terrible like Orlando takes place, and then within that new light, it seems like the president said something he shouldn't have said, even if the context was different at the time. So we were really careful about that. Right. And then all the stuff I would say about whatever anatomy and whatnot, except after the Republican debate this year, apparently that's not the case.
But interestingly, obviously, race has been a pretty fertile territory for the president. One of your favorite lines, right, addresses the issue.
Yes, I'm not sure every president should should joke about race, but I think that what you've seen the president do well is kind of walk up to where the line would be, but and push. He's edgy for a president. He's not. If he was a full-time comedian, he'd go further than that. But he's not. He has a day job, and I think that is. I think that. But and I think he knows that, and knowing where those lines are is one of the reasons he's been so effective as a comedy kind of figure.
Right. And who told Obama to respond to the meme, "Thanks, Obama"?
That was me.
Really? All right. So did
yes, that was like
explain it a bit. When did this happen? How did that conversation go?
I just kind of carried a torch for this for years of like wanting to get the president on camera saying thanks, Obama, and I had tried to work it into at least one correspondence center, maybe two, and then different things came up, and then finally we did a thing with BuzzFeed. Right. Where it just sort of made sense with the kind of content that they do, and it was at this point I was trying it no matter what, and so they really liked it, and so it ended up in that script, and I finally, for some people they're like, I passed healthcare, and I'm like, I got the president to make fun of a meme. It is fun.
Exactly. There you go. And this relates to it, and while this is a current example, which I know you can't exactly speak to, I think you could shed a little light. The question is, do you help late night writers when the president slow jams the news with Jimmy Fallon? So while again I was just in New York when the president was slow jamming the news, but obviously you have your other job. But to what extent? What is that interplay like?
Yeah,
the professional writers.
My general rule was always in the same way that I wouldn't want when we were working, for example, Funny or Die on Ferns. It would be aggravating if they jumped in with a lot of policy suggestions. I felt like it was not my job to tell them how to be funny. They're clearly very, very good at it. Mm-hmm. And so on the late night shows and stuff, we've sometimes sent something or had an idea, but we tend to try to be respectful of letting them do what they do better than anybody. And then, with Ferns, I think the major contribution I had nothing to do with being funny. It was reminding getting a plug for the phone number, not just the website, which at the time was a very big deal. It was not hilarious, but the kind of thing that we could do at the White House that Funny or Die couldn't do. So thinking about what you bring to the table.
Got it.
And I think that's a credit to David because part of the reason why that was so successful is because of that, right? Is because the White House, David aside, but the White House is not a comedy powerhouse, right? But so they trusted the experts, much like we trusted Mikey Dickerson and those kids of those Silicon Valley engineers that come to Washington, fix healthcare.gov. There was a lot of trust from David and Cody and the communications team that that joke, how does it feel to be the last black president, that was going to hit, right? And so yeah, I think that is a credit to the faith that the White House had in Funny or Die, that they knew how to do the comedy part.
And so a question we have here is, we need more people of color and women in political comedy. What does Funny or Die's writing staff look like, and how is it including us?
Oh, it's a very good question. Well, the writing staff, I will say, it's almost, I'm trying to think of a picture that I could describe, and it's almost a caricature of a whole bunch of white men wearing Birkenstocks. No, it's not true. No, our team is very diverse at Funny or Die. The incredible thing about Funny or Die is some of our highest performing videos are not with comedians, but they're with Waka Flocka Flame and P. Diddy and LeBron James and some of the biggest stars in the world. So our writing staff has to reflect that. And stars, we build creative around a lot of our influencers that we work with. So when we're doing, for instance, we did a whole video series around the LGBT laws in states around the country, these discriminatory laws. And our head writer, LP, is a woman and a lesbian, and she wrote this series that became a wild success. Millions of views. We did one for North Carolina, we did one for Mississippi, we did one from, forgetting all of the laws, you can't even keep track.
Yeah,
now.
Unfortunately
there's been a lot. Right. So the writer's room does have to reflect the content that we're pushing out. And that goes for the upper echelons of Funny or Die as well. I will say this though, there will never be a place, and David will probably agree with this, that There'll never be a workplace, I think, that I will work at in the future that is more diverse than the White House in so many different ways. So it feels a lot whiter than before, I will say that, but it is still very diverse.
Another question is, does it take a certain type of person to pull this off? For example, if Hillary Clinton tried to be funny, would it work?
I think that I do think that the president is a particularly good performer, and that's true.
And if you had to break it down,
Yeah.
what would you say is his comedic approach?
Well, I think it's two things. I think number one is he has very good timing, which is not something that they teach you in president school, right? That's not a requirement.
Right.
And you don't have to be a good president to do that. And the other thing, he has a real sense of audience, that he just gets how a room full of people is feeling and can play off of that. And again, those are not required skills for a president, but he, I think, is really good, whether he's delivering a serious speech or a funny one, because of that. I think that the trick with different politicians is not to say, how can I be funny like this current president in the way that he's funny, but to say, what makes me funny? And I think everybody, if you're a public figure playing off that persona, there's always something you can do with it. I will say, I really liked Hillary's appearance on SNL earlier this year. I thought it was good. It wasn't, no one's like, oh, we should cast her full time on SNL. But they shouldn't be. She was game and she was charming, and I think that's the goal.
Got it.
I think Hillary's funny. I think Trump's funny. I think Bernie is unintentionally funny. I don't know. I think that they all have different, and we also know. Funny is also a very relative term. There's a lot of ways to be funny. This president has a particular. I think David's right. He's just incredible timing and incredible oratory skill, and he's just like the coolest guy in the room at all times. So that's like, it's cool that he's cool, and that's funny. But I think, no, look, funny or not, we're excited to work with any and all people, future presidents.
Right. So taking you up on that, one of the questions is, will you create funny or die videos with Trump, or just about him with, say, Johnny Depp?
Yes, exactly. We already beat him to the punch. So if folks don't know, we shot a movie called Art of the Deal, based off of Donald Trump's best-selling memoir. Is it a memoir? I don't even know what it is.
It's a book.
It's a book. Starring Johnny Depp. It's incredible. I don't want to break news, but you'll be able to see it soon. I don't want to break any news on stage. So I feel like we've already did it. I would prefer.
But if at this point it would have to be Paul Manafort, because Corey can't call you anymore. But so if Paul Manafort calls and said, guess what? We want, heading into the general election, this is our moment. We would like Trump to be in a Funny or Die video.
Look, we would never say no to a conversation.
I would say no to that conversation.
Oh, there you go. Well,
I think.
All right, go ahead.
there we go. David Litt.
All right.
David Litt, everyone.
But yes, elaborate. Please elaborate.
This is why you do the business side of things.
Exactly. This is why we work well together.
I feel like this, to me, there needs to be some. I don't think it's the same as saying we would never work with a Republican or we would never work with somebody who's not a Democrat.
Right.
But I think that in this particular case, I think it would be hypocritical of me to say, how can people who are Republicans in Congress support Trump and then be like, oh no, but if he's paying me money, I would do it. So I personally would take a sick day if necessary. But
I would look, when I say take the conversation, I would be willing to be, produce a video with Donald Trump in it if we could make fun of him the entire time. But no, I think that David's right. Look, our number one rule is to be funny, and our number two rule is to be really truthful to our audience. And so our audience. Much like many members of Congress who have refused to stand behind Donald Trump, just not down with racism, just not down with it. We have some poll numbers to prove it. So we likely will not be doing a video with Donald Trump.
And then we're short on time, but we have a question about how if you could both speak briefly about your comedic path, since this is an unconventional career and folks are hoping for advice. So obviously, again, you guys kind of shortcut it. You had some shortcuts to where you stand today, but could you talk a little about that?
Sure. Yeah, I did improv comedy in college, and I grew up in New York City, and I did like amateur stand-up when I was 15, which at the time I thought was very normal. And and so when I moved to DC, I think I ended up having what in Washington is a comedy background. So that was enough when I became a speechwriter that people wanted me to write jokes. Then now I work with LA people, and I'm like, oh, well, that's a real comedy background. So I'm glad I didn't know that.
Exactly. And Brad.
I am a recovering thespian. I did community theater growing up at McCarter Theater. Juliet's a Princeton grad, but I started in A Christmas Carol at McCarter Theater. It was the coolest thing. I got to miss school for like 2 months, and I got paid. And it was like the greatest thing.
What character were you?
I was like an ensemble member. I wore tights. That was the big thing. But yeah, and then for whatever reason, I don't know if that was on my resume or something when I started working at the White House, but they gave me the portfolio to be the liaison to the creative community, celebrities and writers and producers. So, and mostly I'm not funny, but I stand next to David Litt, and that's really where the humor lies on my side. So.
Excellent. Well, I hope you all will join me in thanking David and Brad for taking time to discuss political humor.